Hey guys, Zom Fox here, and today I wanted to look at an article by USFL News Hub that basically makes a very quick overview of the USFL to NFL players, and it's basically just by the numbers. So let's get right into it. USFL to NFL by the numbers, a season in review, USFL players in the NFL. This is by Patrick Raffinio. This is posted literally just a few days ago, but I just saw it recently. So without further ado, as the NFL season comes to an end, it's time to review how many of the USL players fared throughout the year. The USL saw 57 of their players get NFL contracts in 22. Of those 57, 28 of themselves found themselves on an NFL payroll at one point in the NFL season, which is a 49% success rate. The figure that shows an extremely success rate is the $8 million USL players totaled that is now added to their bank accounts. And just as a quick one, I forgot to get the image for it, but Cavante Turpin earned the most with $705K versus Bailey Gaither's least at $11.5K. And then there was an approximate $286K per player that made it. So then we get into, with the financial success also came the on-the-field successful USL players. The USL saw 11 players take regular season snaps in 22, with Cavante Turpin leading the charge, earning a Pro Bowl selection. Others like Dominique Davis, Maurice Alexander, and Tay Hayes all saw significant playing time for the Bengals, Lions, and Patriots respectively. The USL even saw multiple specialists play roles throughout the NFL regular season. Now, we also get to guys like Taylor Bertollet, who was perfect on kicks but then ended up getting hurt. You have Mitch Fabroni, who was top 5 in tackles for long snappers at the time of his injury despite playing in less games. Tucker Addington put together 3 games of clean snapping for the Patriots, filling the role as lawn snapper. And then for Joe Cardona. And then even Ramis Ahmed was supposed to be a kickoff guy until he got injured. And naturally, a lot of these guys, were able to make a decent amount of money. And then we get into the USFL also saw NFL season with 6 of their players ending on an NFL 53-man roster. Micah Abernathy, DeMarcus Gates, Cavante Turpin, Tay Hayes, and Tucker Addington, and Alex Akinbulu all ended the season on an active roster and could contribute even more next year. Defensive lineman Dominique Davis, Mitch Fabroni, the long snapper, and receiver/kick returner Maurice Alexander both had also been signed to active roster at some point during the season as well. Now, of those guys, naturally, it's hard to say how many of them do continue on a roster. Cavante Turpin, though, is a guarantee. He's probably going to re-sign with the Cowboys and be a legit player on there, because he was a Pro Bowler and he was on the All-Pro team for the Players Union. So, we'll see for sure. All those other guys is kind of up in the air, but naturally we'll see. Now, with this 57 original USL players to sign NFL contracts so far, only 5 have returned back to the league. All USFL cornerback Channing Stribling leads them, while you also have Devin Gray, Matt Colburn, Dexter Williams, and Stevie Scott are all returning to their respective USL teams, with Stribling and Williams making waves by choosing the USFL over the XFL after being drafted in the XFL's 22 November draft. Out of the 33 free agents, USFL to NFL signees who were not retained by NFL teams, the USFL has retained 5 of them so far in the early stages of the offseason. But that's just the beginning. We don't know for sure. Naturally, a lot of players are just deciding on which league they want to go to. Now, while the USFL has retained some of the talent and lost to the NFL, it did lose 54% of the 33 available players to the XFL in the November draft. Overall, the USL seen 61 of their former players since the XFL has begun selecting players. However, the USFL has not let all the talent go directly to the NFL, as the USFL has managed to sign 6 players who were drafted by XFL teams. Now, of those guys, the biggest one is Reggie Corbin and Channing Stribling, 2 all USFL members that ended up going back to the USFL. So I think it's also the fact that they probably were letting some guys go, but we'll see. And then who's left over? As stated, there were 33 free agents that USFL players were not signed by an NFL team or ended the season on a team. After both XFL drafts and return of the 5 USFL players, there are about 10 players that are still left up for grabs. Tomase Lalil and Tigray Scales, both of whom were in the NFL during the XFL supplemental draft. Scales was one of the 28 players who spent time in the NFL during the regular season, as he was in a couple months of the Bengals. And then there's naturally a few other free agents that I don't have image for. Those include Bug Howard, Bailey Gaither, Ishmael Hyman, Osiris Mitchell, Christian Sham, KJ Costello, Sage Surratt, Derek Dillon. Overall, there's still a lot of really, really, really solid free agents available for either league to try and pursue. Then currently there are 10 players who still remain on the active market, like the guys I just said. And while it's still unsigned, it's quite possible the USL can get even more of those guys back. With the XFL training camp on its way and injuries more likely to be filled by alumni academy players, it appears the remaining USL free agents could find themselves back with the original USFL team. Now that is a huge thing because of how the XFL is doing it. It's not necessarily like the Team 9 they had in the last one, but the idea is that if a player gets hurt and would miss time and they get cut, they could just go to the USFL and play a whole season there, which could bode well for them, worse for them, or just good for both of them. And then the end of it is that as the NFL season comes to a close and the USFL begins to ramp up operations in March, the success of seeing 28 players spend time on NFL payrolls is definitely a huge accomplishment for the league, looking to recruit viable NFL talent. As the USL season ramps up for 2023, even with the competition of the XFL, the USFL will have no problem being utilized as a platform for players to showcase their talents for the NFL and create their own brands. So, my thoughts on this whole thing is the fact that it's kind of what you would expect. The fact is, when you look at it and you actually think about it, all three of these spring football leagues have kind of similar trajectories and stuff like that, in terms of the fact that the XFL is the only one that has produced truly, I guess, successful QBs, in a sense, with P.J. Walker and Taylor Heineke. But the caveat to that is the XFL didn't produce a single Pro Bowler. Both other leagues did, where you had the kicker, Younghoe Koo, go from the AAF to the NFL and become a Pro Bowler, and then you had Kvante Turpin go from the USFL to that. So I think all three leagues have shown very similar talent, especially considering the fact that a lot of guys that are on either the XFL 3.0 or USL rosters were in both, or if not, all three of those leagues naturally. So it's definitely a good thing, though, that you're having this high success rate. And it's definitely a great thing that Kvante Turpin has been as good as he's been and is still playing in the playoffs, at least as of when this video is coming out. But I think naturally this is boding to the question of what happens with a lot of those free agents. Do they go to the USFL? The big one probably being KJ Costello, because at least at this moment, we kind of have no idea what's going on with the Stars quarterback situation. Hopefully they get Cookus back, but we don't know for sure. But naturally, a lot of this is kind of, we'll wait and see. But overall, I think that it's going to bode pretty well for both leagues. I think that this splitting of talent naturally, just like a lot of things between the USFL and XFL 3.0 are kind of one side gets an advantage here, but then the other side gets the advantage here. If a player gets injured during the XFL preseason, they can just leave and go to the USFL versus, the other kind versus, a player could choose to play in the XFL first, meaning they don't go to the USFL, but a player could choose the USFL over the XFL. It's just like I've said for the most part. It's a mixed bag that you kind of just have to play it by ear and just have to wait and see. This has been Zomfox. If you enjoy this content and want to be notified since I upload any videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. And as always, have a great night.